and Robin for organizing this. Delighted to see so many colleagues here today. So I'm going to say very briefly about what is it, what it's about and why, and also talk a little about what we have learned so far about the fund. So I'm chair of BAAL. In fact, I have been looking after running the competition in the last 2 rounds. So I have a special relationship and I'm very fond of this special stream of funding. So the fund, the purpose of the fund is to encourage and promote innovative activities which link research and impact public engagement within the field of applied linguistics. So that's the main aim of this fund. And I'm going to say a bit more about what we mean by the link. You probably can sense we actually very carefully word the relationship between the research and impact and public engagement. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. So some facts about this funding. This was actually launched in 2012, exactly a decade ago. And this is the largest strand of funding we offer from the association. And we do have other scholarship and book prize available, but they're for different purposes. We have funded 5 rounds so far. Most of the time is really dependent on how much funding we have. So far we have funded a total of £50,000, and that's well spread out in 5 rounds. Each round, we don't really have the quota, how many projects we fund, but that the funding is capped. But for this round, Rachel and Robin will have some good news to tell you later. So why this funding? We did talk about this is actually we're using this fund to encourage good research. And by that, we're talking about promoting socially engaged applied linguistics. I think that's actually, given in the past 10 years, it has become clearer and clearer. We have a lot to offer as applied linguistic researchers, particularly given our applied nature research and our very nature of a social engaged nature of our research. With this fund, we are very keen to do something outside REF remit. So back in 2012, that was actually just before the first round of REF that actually has impact case studies. And that's actually coincidentally, we have been sort of 2 years ahead, REF's narratives and discourse about impact. And our interpretation of impact is different from the way REF set it. And I will explain a bit more later. The third purpose of the fund is really support, and this is primary really is to support our community, our BAAL members. So one of the eligible criteria is you have to be BAAL member in order to apply for this. And we are particularly interested to support early career researchers. So that's actually 3 aims behind the funding. So what we have learned so far is, our applied linguistics community are very innovative. We have seen fantastic range of innovative activities, and they are not limited just language learning. We do have a project that actually work within the schools and work with teachers, but also go beyond these conventional forum or platform, if you like. So we have projects that look at language policy, police interviews, footballers, and open access publications, and looking to reader digest in order to disseminate publication research findings, and also some of the project focus on communication. So in terms of impact, we're very delighted when we actually run an invited colloquium back in 2019, the last conference before the face-to-face conference before the pandemic. We look at the impact, and some of the impact clearly have a significant impact on the local, the city, the school we worked with, the city we lived in, and some international impact, partly because the collaborative partner is based outside UK, and that clearly has some international impact. And some of the impact cases which meant to be have a local impact has actually gone beyond the regional focus. And one of the important areas impact, and I should say, is clearly in the research capacity building. It's actually very pleased to hear those who have been involved in the project 10 years later or 9 years later, they have talked about how their research inspired the team they have worked with and to sustain the impact of the project that way, whether they are students, teachers, or policymakers. We do have questions, about continuation of the impact beyond the project funding, and that's something I think that's something a colleague might want to consider: how we sustain the impact beyond the funded project period. And some projects have a clear sustainability built in. For example, the Reader Digest. But then again, there is a funding limitation, and what it's going to do after funding run out, after 1 year or 2 years, for example. So the last aspect of, I think what we have learned so far is really about the relationship between research and the other part, whether you call it impact, engagement, or application. The name of the funding has applying in it, and that's actually emphasized the strong applied nature of our research. So what we have learned is application has to mean more than simply telling people what we have discovered in our research. And impact cannot simply be added on or afterthought. So what we have learned is the research. If you think about research as the other, whether you call it impact, engagement, application, it is a two-way process. So the key is to start and end with a collaborative, and sometimes people have actually taken further, turned it into participatory research approach in the designing and delivering the research funding. So I think that's actually the main thing I would like to say, what we have learned, and I'm happy to take on some questions later on, but I'll pass on to our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Juhua. That was really interesting and also incredibly useful. So we're now going to hear from the 3 current holders of the fund, and we'll start with Chris and Alice, if that's okay, and then Chico / Christopher, followed by Hamish. So Chris and Alice, over to you.
Thanks very much, Rachel and Juhua. I have an unstable internet connection, so I hope I don't cut out. Both of you cut out in the last 5 minutes. Sorry about that. Yeah, Alice and I are going to talk about our project briefly. This was an international collaboration. So me in York here in the UK, Alice in Heilbronn in Germany, and another partner, Yuan Qian, in Suzhou in China. And in fact, both Alice and Yuan are ECRs, early career researchers. Alice a little less than Yuan. We applied to this scheme, actually at the suggestion of Alice, who is a previous awardee, in fact, of the Applying Linguistics Fund. And it seemed like a really good fit for the funding criteria because it's all about impact. And in fact, it grew out of a broader project which was submitted to REF as an impact case study.
We've lost Chris, haven't we? Just for a few minutes there. Alice, feel free to step in, to turn your mic on if you want.
I was mentioning there about linking research and application. We also had very enthusiastic support from MA program directors, which we could document in our application. So that was another box that was ticked. Am I actually breaking up?
You did. We lost you for a few seconds, but if you keep going, Alice is on standby to jump in.
All right. Hope I can struggle through this. I was saying we had enthusiastic support from MA program directors who we could document in the application, and we also thought about the outputs quite carefully. We had a very concrete output, which was going to be a set of teacher training materials in the form of video clips of teacher role models. So I'll tell you a little bit about the project in a moment, which we thought again strengthened that link between research and the application of the research. We also proposed to share the findings of the research as much as we could with stakeholders, you might say. So we proposed, and we still hope to do an accessible summary in the OASIS database, and we also are going to prepare reports of the findings in both German and Mandarin Chinese for the specific user groups that we focused on. So just a few words about the project itself, and then I'll pass over to Alice, who's going to tell you a little bit about how we use the funding. What we were trying to do in this project was to challenge monolithic thinking, Anglo-centric thinking about English, which is associated with lots of unfair social and educational outcomes, especially for non-native speakers and users and learners of the language. And this is really an uphill struggle because of the very, very entrenched ideological and ontological beliefs involved, and especially difficult for practicing teachers because of the great amount of time and effort that they've invested in perfecting knowledge of standard British or standard American English. So we decided what we needed to do was focus on pre-service teachers. And we adapted a method that was, I think, first developed in applied linguistics around 20 years ago in Japan, which was near-peer role modeling. That earlier work was learners modeling self-belief in their learning process for other learners, but we adapted it for teachers. So we produced short video clips of 3 German-speaking teachers and 4 Mandarin-speaking teachers, reflecting on their pluralistic, non-monolithic orientation to English. And we played these videos to pre-service teachers, either near peers. So this was the video clips played to near peers who were German speakers in either Germany or Austria, or Mandarin speakers in China. And also we played these video clips to more distant peers who were who were speakers of other languages in the UK and in Spain. We measured their beliefs before and after the videos were played. We collected qualitative data too, and we have now analyzed the results. The results we're very happy about because they supported our hypotheses. And basically that's what we did. I better hand over to Alice because presumably her internet connection is better than mine. Over to you, Alice.
All right, thanks. So how did we use the money? We used some of the money to have the video recordings transcribed and translated into English when necessary. We needed to divert funds from travel to video production because COVID meant that online interviews needed to be conducted, but therefore more production work was there. We used the money to pay a video company in York who helped us produce 4 videos for our target group. And we didn't want to have a one-off product. We wanted to create sustainable open educational resources that can be used by teacher educators with their trainee teachers and by trainee teachers independently. So this way our research can make an impact in teacher training and teacher training institutions. Also, this video can be combined with the Changing English's website written by Chris and Rachel. That is really available online. And I'm going to post the links in the chat in case you're interested. So we've got 2 videos from teachers of English in China, 2 videos from teachers of English in Germany, and they will talk about Global English's teaching practices in one video and about Global English's beliefs in the other. And I'll post the link to the Changing English's website as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alice. Good idea to post those links in the chat so we can all see those. Some really interesting ideas there that perhaps transferable to other projects. So thank you so much for that. Really good. All right, so that was the first of 3. I will now move on to the second of our 3 projects, and Christopher Anderson, aka Chico, is going to talk us through why he applied for the funds and what he used the money for. So over to you, Christopher.
Thank you very much. Yes, apologies about this. I completely forgot that my Zoom profile is my personal one, not my work one. But anyway, so my project relates back to some research I'd been doing, looking at regional and cultural identity of the town of Margate, which is a seaside town in Kent in the southeast of England, and a town that's been undergoing a process of partial gentrification. And I was very interested in how these processes and changes were being discursively constructed. So the identity of the town, the identity of the people in the town, the different people, the gentrifiers, the locals, and so forth. So this work led me to create a corpus of texts with the help of some research interns, and the corpus is over 1,000 texts, which we're kind of working through and analysing at the moment. And what I was thinking about, and this is where coming in and getting some funding is there was a point at which I'd published a paper, I was building this corpus up, and I was thinking, what do the community or the communities within Margate actually think about these texts? And these texts are sort of social media, mass media, visual, audio, visual, and so forth. What are their reactions to these texts, which are talking about their town? Often talking about the town in which, certainly from what I've been seeing, was a kind of a construction of their town which wasn't their own construction of the town. There was intercultural conflict in that way. That I framed it within intercultural conflict. So the idea was to have a community, some form of community engagement or public engagement, whereby members of the public, and particularly members of the public from more marginalized communities whose voices seem to be hidden in this mass of textual activity, particularly on social media and mass media, and their reactions to it. And so that was the idea. That was the sort of the germ of the idea. So I made some inquiries and contacts with various bodies, various places within Margate where we could have some kind of event with the text so that people could come, and this could react to the text and also provide additional data. So it would be a public engagement event, but also a research event at the same time. So that's where it started from. And I finally found an organization called Olbies, which is a community interest company, which do a lot of outreach work, particularly with young people. And they were very, very supportive of the idea. So I saw the Applying Linguistics Fund, and I thought, well, this would be very useful if it fitted in. I made an application. The money the idea of the money is to support the event, the paying for the event, the kind of the basic costs of putting on this event. I say event, technically it would be an exhibition, but I don't like the word exhibition because, again, a lot of the marginalized communities feel very resistant to the notion of art, of exhibitions, that kind of thing. And this comes from other research done by sociologists who did some research, parallel research. So it's an event. And so that's the simple kind of overview. The problem was COVID. So we haven't been able to run the event. So although, you know, the fund has been carried on for another year, and hopefully we're going to run it this year, because of COVID and all sorts of complications, which I'm going to go into the details of. However, with the help of I've been able to get money for interns at my institution. And another one this year, we have done an online exhibition, and we set up social media. So we kind of, which in of itself, although this isn't directly related to the applied linguistics funding, but it's helped to support that, because we now have, you know, a good following on Instagram. We've got about 1,400 followers, for example. We've got a lot of followers on Facebook. So we're hoping that this will be the kind of outreach work done already to encourage people to come to the event. So in terms of where this is going, on the one hand, what we want to get out of this is some form of archive of this database, so it's publicly accessible, so an online database. But something else that's coming out of this is that it's sort of gathered interest at my own institution, and it's actually built up. So I have 4 other colleagues from sociology, education, media, and we're developing this, and we're going to be putting a series of research bids in. So it's actually expanded in the time that, you know, I put this original application on. It was just a little thing I was doing, and it's expanded onwards to a broader study. So I'm bringing in the applied linguistics perspective into this. So, you know, we're hoping, as I say, to run it this year and spend the money. The money will be brilliant to support that, to support this event. But at the same time, we're looking to the future. On the one hand, so this wider study, and on the other hand, looking at the way that we can not just have this database, you know, resting in my computer, as it were, but made public and accessible, that people can respond to it. And, you know, we've done that very partially with an online exhibition, and the social media with it. So that's a kind of brief overview.
Thank you very much for that, Christopher. Really interesting to hear about how you adapted to some very challenging circumstances, but it sounds like there were some benefits also, and to the adaptations that you made, benefits to the project and participants. So thank you, fascinating. All right, so that's 2 out of the 3, and we'll move now to the 3rd and final current Applying Linguistics Fund grant holder, and that's Hamish. So Hamish, whenever you're ready, it's over to you.
Thanks very much. Lovely to see everyone here. Our project was one of the things that attracted us to apply to the grant was this idea of applying linguistics. Now, I'm Hamish Chalmers, my colleague Victoria Murphy, and Phaedra Faitaki, we all work in, these are the people who conducted the research, exist in the Department of Education in the University of Oxford. And so the notion of applying linguistics research for us means, how does it get applied in schools, and what are the implications of the applied linguistics research in schools? I came out of a background of teaching, particularly teaching children who don't speak English at home. And so and that aligns with the interests of my other 2 colleagues as well. So around the notion of EAL learners, children who are learning English as an additional language. And one of the things that I sort of felt as a teacher was often the relevance of research to my practice. Lots of interesting research, but not necessarily anything that spoke directly to me as a teacher. that could allow me to improve my practice and therefore improve the lot of the children who I was teaching. So from that sort of experience as a teacher, we were interested in finding out whether research which has been done already is relevant, meaningful and useful to teachers in informing their practice. And if not, what could we do instead, or what kind of research ought to be done in order to apply that linguistics research. We became aware of an organisation called the James Lind Alliance, which is an organisation that runs what are called priority setting partnerships, or PSPs, in fields of healthcare. And the motivation behind the PSP is that the people who benefit, who are the presumed or the supposed beneficiaries of research, that is practitioners, this is all healthcare, so practitioners such as doctors and caregivers, but also patients and people who look after patients as well, family members, to find out from them what their pressing questions are about a particular area of health research. So for example, they ran a priority setting partnership which looked at what people with osteoarthritis of the knee wanted from research on that particular field. Most of the research through doing literature reviews tends to be focused on, in that field, on drug therapies and surgery. But when they asked people who actually suffer from this condition what they wanted from research and what would help them, the overwhelming answer was that they wanted help with managing fatigue. Quite different from the research that's being done. And so that raises a question of what's the point of doing research if no one's interested in the responses to it or the answers from it. So we thought maybe there would be a parallel there with teachers, in that this is what researchers are doing. Does that match with what teachers actually articulate or say is important to them in terms of informing their practice? So we decided to run our own PSP, and this is where the application to BAAL came in very handy, because that funded the parts of the process of a PSP, a priority setting partnership, which involved stakeholders, people who use research. So in forming the application, we consulted with teachers and other educators that we have personal or professional relationships with, and asked them to be involved in this. And so the initial idea was to set up a steering group of the people for whom the research is important, so that they could help steer this project and keep us grounded. And that I say in some of the presentations I've given on this subject, help us climb down from our ivory towers and put our feet on the ground and make sure that the research that we do, remembering that we're in the Department of Education, has some practical value for teachers, i.e. it's meaningful, it responds to genuine uncertainties that they have about practice, and that therefore it can be used in the classroom to help. So having the support through those organisations, we recruited help from an ethnic minority achievement service in Portsmouth, from EAL specialists and other teachers in mainstream schools, and parents of children who speak English as an additional language, to support the bid and to say whether they thought it was a good idea, and then they wrote letters of support for our bid, which was really helpful. As a result of that, and as a result of successfully applying for the grant, we set up this steering group. We then worked with them. Our role was facilitation, rather than we weren't. We know what researchers want to research. They talk about it all the time. We don't know yet, or we didn't know what teachers want us to research. So our role was as facilitators for this sort of consultation, essentially, with teachers and parents and EAL students about what research would be helpful, what kind of research they felt that they could apply. Indeed, the steering group helped us to set up what we called an uncertainty survey, which was where we had a number of topics which people could input their sort of general uncertainties or unanswered questions about their practice. So this was categorized as things like new to English learners, or advanced EAL learners, or EAL and special educational needs, and so on. And so we got a couple of hundred responses there, having advertised this through YouTube, through Facebook and Twitter, and through the department's comms, and also by writing to organisations such as NALDIC and NASI and so on, to encourage people to tell us what unanswered questions they had about their practice. And this gave us a whole load of free text responses, a massive corpus, in fact, of free text responses, in which we identified 767 individual unanswered questions. We then did a kind of discourse analysis on that corpus to try and collapse similar questions into each other, so that, you know, one person might have articulated a question like, I mean, how do I help my my new to English EAL learners with reading? Someone else might say, I've got children who have only been in England for a year or so, and I want to help them with their phonics, and we might have collapsed those into a more sort of more clearly articulated question that could be addressed through research. When we had done that, that corpus analysis and that creation of these more sort of specific research questions, we created what we called a ranking survey, and we re-advertised this to everybody who had taken part in the first phase, and also continued to encourage people to get involved from who might not necessarily have done the first phase, to then rank those questions in order of priority for them. So that we could see what kinds of things were important to teachers, so that we could then try to develop a research agenda which would address those needs. We got lots of people contributing to that, and that ended up with a ranked list of average priority across the entire group of respondents. And we took the top 25 of those and had an online workshop where more people from our sort of target audience, teachers, parents, other educators, heads, local authority figures, and so on, to work together in a workshop to discuss and debate these questions, to look at the wording of them, and to see if they could be, if there's any clarification needed, and then ultimately through a democratic process of discussion, debate, and then finally voting, to come up with a top 10 of research priorities in the field of BAAL, which we did. The fund helped us because we used all of the fund that we were lucky enough to be awarded to pay for a research assistant to do the data crunching, because that really was the major job here, was to take that massive corpus of questions and try to filter it out into themes, and then from themes into individual questions, and then to do the analysis on the data from the ranking survey. So that's all of our funding went there, and that was extremely helpful because we were able to employ somebody who was a DPhil student at Oxford to help us with it, which was meant that so there's me as an ECR, despite my relatively advanced age. I'm still only an early career researcher because I was a teacher for 20 years before that. A DPhil student, and then Victoria Murphy, who is currently now the the director of the Department of Education. So we felt that it allowed us to be really inclusive in here and get a range of people at our end, but also it freed us up then to concentrate on the comms end of it, and that is recruiting people to take part. We created videos, just using free software and free platforms to do that, so that we could advertise the project. So that, again, that was super helpful. We had originally asked for a little bit more money so that we could hold the workshops in person, but BAAL said, is there any way you could skim some of this off? And then COVID happened, and we thought, fine, yeah, okay, that solves everyone's problems. We'll just have it online. And luckily, by that time, we had all, participants in the workshop and us as academics, got a bit more used to online working in the way that we're doing now. So we were really pleased with the project. We felt that it was a really sort of concrete way to involve stakeholders and research users in essentially the beginning, these sort of the embryonic stages of research production, so that we could help them by helping us to know what kinds of research they wanted. The major outcome or outputs from the project is a report of the project with this top 10 list of questions, which we have circulated to funders, because obviously funders are going to be interested in knowing what will be useful for them to fund, how they can get impact from their investment. So we sent the reports and the top 10 list to people like the ESRC, the Education Endowment Foundation, the BEL Foundation, who fund a lot of it, fund almost exclusively EAL research, Nuffield and Leverhulme as well. And we publicised this list to our colleagues at BAAL and broader. And this has given us some really good sort of starting points as well for our DPhil researchers and our master's students as well. Say, you know, if you want a topic which is going to be meaningful, have a look at this list and see what you can do. And so that has led to some primary research, so people taking the research questions and doing primary research to find out, but also importantly, some systematic reviewing. Because one of the some of the responses we got were from some people after publishing this was, well, we know these answers already. Now, if we look back at research synthesis, such as the systematic reviews on EAL that were done by Victoria Murphy and Adam Unthier in 2014, and then a sort of follow-up to that systematic review by Emily Oxley and Cécile Decat a couple of years later, we have very little research that has been, as far as we can tell, that has been done in the EAL context, that is in the UK for them in the main. And so by starting with these questions and having people say, well, we know the answers, we can then address that empirically and say, well, this is what we, you know, this is what we can legitimately claim about our state of knowledge on this subject based on doing systematic reviews, which then identifies gaps, which can then be allow for more profitable use of our resources, including time and energy, not just money, to answer questions or address questions for which there is demonstrated interest among our constituent participants, teachers. And so we were really pleased to be able to take advantage of the Applying Linguistics Fund to apply some linguistics research. Oh, and before I go, I'm just putting in the chat now the website address for the project, where you can read about the project in a bit more detail. You can read that top 10 list. And if anyone here is looking for a new research project, then please, please, please see if there's anything on that list that tickles your fancy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamish. Fascinating, really, really interesting. And thank you for that link. And Christopher, also, you mentioned your social media channels, so feel free to pop those into the chat if you'd like to do that. So Hamish, thank you. That was really, really fascinating. And again, lots of, I think, ideas for anyone in thinking about applying for how they might work together with users of research, with community groups, right from the beginning when they're starting to plan. So thank you so much for that. So we've heard now from all three of the current fund holders. Thank you so much. That was really great. So I think Robbie and I just wanted to quickly draw your attention to a couple of aspects of the call, this year's call that we've put out. And I just popped in the chat a link to the BAAL website, if right back at the beginning there. And if you click on that link, you'll see a document which you can download, a Word document, which covers all the points that we're going to make. So I'll just quickly go through that, and then Robbie, feel free to jump in with anything you think I've missed. So it's a Word document which you can download. I'm not going to try and share my screen in case it goes disastrously wrong. I think it's better if you just click on that link and then navigate to that document yourself. But so just a couple of points, which may be a pretty obvious, but in order to apply, the lead applicant does need to be a member of BAAL. They can be a full member or a student member. So not everybody in the team is required to be a member, but the lead applicant must be. On the second page, we've laid out 5 criteria that we'll use when we're scoring the applications that come in. So if you could have a look at that criteria. The first 2 criteria are about the user group. So we'll score the relevance and significance of the activity to the user group. And then secondly, we'll score any evidence of interest or enthusiasm for the project from that user group. So a couple of the speakers mentioned letters of support, for example, which could be incredibly useful. Thirdly, we look at relevance to the themes that the BAAL Executive Committee have selected for this year's fund. So you can see the themes there: minority languages, sign languages, multilingualism, discrimination, language rights, and linguistic citizenship. So we'll score on relevance to those themes. The fourth criteria is a catch-all quality criteria. So looking at things like whether the goals of the research project are achievable, is the costing, is the budget realistic, etc. Is it something that's innovative, something that we think we haven't seen before? And then finally, around a score around the expectations of that link between research and impact/public engagement. We'll be looking at the outputs and outcomes and seeing how sort of realistic they are, and how closely they link the research with the user group. So those are the 5 criteria. There's up to £15,000 to bid for, but you can see that last year we divided up that funding between 3 projects. So you can decide whether you want to bid for the whole of the 15,000 or whether you want to be more modest in your application and bid for a smaller amount. And as I think Hamish mentioned, sometimes we do come back to applicants and ask them to reconsider their budget if we would like to fund them, but we don't, if perhaps there are other projects that we would also like to fund. So sometimes there is that opportunity for negotiation. And then finally, just the timelines. So you can see on that document the application form, and we'd like to receive those by the 1st of April this year, to the funding@baal.org.uk email address that you've been using to correspond with me and Robbie about this event today. So the application form, no more than 2,000 words, including not including your CV and the budget and any other letters of support, etc. So I think that's just a quick run through the call. Robbie, is there anything that I've missed out or that you would like to add onto that?
I think just a sort of reminder of the sorts of activities or expenses that we can and can't cover. We can't cover replacement teaching and those sorts of categories, but of course, the funding may be used to hire a research assistant to contribute to the work, perhaps on a casual basis. And of course, if you're arranging, knowledge exchange activities or meetings with stakeholders, then this is a great use of the funds to bring people together. And perhaps even now that we are, I don't want to say emerging from COVID, it feels like we're never going to emerge from COVID, but face to face again. So it may be that travel expenses, etc., to actually bring people physically together, depending on what you're doing. But yeah, I think to reiterate the point that feasibility is important, and so although the full amount is 15,000, as you can see from last year's successful projects, one of them was less than 1,000, and it was funded because it was the funding they were asking for was appropriate to what they were trying to do. So bigger doesn't always necessarily mean better. I think it's just about whatever is appropriate to what you're doing. Yes, and so the funding at baal.org.uk email is also where you can contact us if you have any questions as the deadline approaches. But I think at this stage we don't have too much time left, so I think it would be good to give people a chance to ask any questions.